What was World War I, and why did it change the world forever? It's a question that echoes through history, shaping our present even now. It wasn't just a war, it was a storm that swept across the globe, pulling in millions from every corner. The old world of empires and certainty crumbled, replaced by a scarred, uncertain future. Pride and ambition simmered beneath Europe's surface, a pot ready to boil over. The war redrew borders, toppled monarchies, and introduced terrifying new ways of fighting. To understand this conflict, we must look beyond names and dates and imagine the lives forever changed by it. This is not just a story of history, but of people, courage, loss, and a world on the edge. Before the first shot rang out, shattering the peace of a continent, Europe stood on the precipice of a conflict unlike any it had ever seen. The year is 1914. And the air is thick with tension, a sense of impending doom hanging heavy over the nations. Four powerful and interconnected forces drove Europe relentlessly toward disaster, each feeding the others in a dangerous cycle. These weren't isolated incidents or minor disagreements. They were fundamental shifts in the political and social landscape. Militarism, nations like Germany and Britain, fueled by industrial might and a sense of national pride, raced to build bigger armies and navies, engaging in a relentless arms race that consumed vast resources and heightened anxieties across the continent. Each nation sought to outdo the other, creating a climate of fear and suspicion. Each new weapon fueling the next, pushing the boundaries of destructive capability and making war seem not only possible, but perhaps even inevitable. The latest technologies were embraced with fervor, promising decisive advantages on the battlefield. Alliances. Europe split into two heavily armed and increasingly hostile camps. The Triple Entente, a somewhat loosely defined agreement, France, Russia, Britain, bound together by mutual interests and a shared concern over Germany's growing power. And the Triple Alliance, a more formal and binding pact, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, united by a complex web of political and strategic considerations. A fight between two could drag in all, transforming a localized conflict into a continent-wide conflagration. The alliance system, intended to maintain peace, instead became a tripwire, ready to unleash unimaginable destruction. Imperialism. Powerful countries competed fiercely for colonies, seeking to expand their empires and control vital resources across the globe. Turning the world into a high-stakes game of Monopoly, where nations vied for dominance and control over vast territories and populations. This competition bred resentment and mistrust, further fueling the flames of war. Nationalism. Pride in one's nation turned toxic, morphing into a dangerous sense of superiority and a willingness to resort to violence to defend national interests, especially in the Balkans, a volatile region known as the powder keg of Europe, where groups like the Serbs dreamed of independence from Austro-Hungarian rule, fueled by a fervent desire for self-determination and a unified national identity. These forces created a complex web of tension, jealousy, and rivalry, making Europe a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Europe was a powder keg, brimming with explosive potential, and it only needed a spark to ignite the whole thing, plunging the continent into a devastating war. The drums of war grew louder, their ominous rhythm echoing across the continent, a constant reminder of the impending conflict. Each nation believed in its own strength and destiny, convinced of its righteousness and its ability to prevail in the coming struggle. But pride and fear made compromise impossible, blinding leaders to the catastrophic consequences of their actions. Diplomatic efforts faltered, and the path to peace seemed increasingly blocked. The stage was set for catastrophe, a tragedy of unimaginable scale that would forever alter the course of history. The world held its breath, unaware of the horrors that lay just around the corner. On June 28, 1914, a single event in Sarajevo ignited the world. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to Austria-Hungary, was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a young Serbian nationalist. The attack was meant as a cry for freedom, but it became the trigger for global conflict. The failed first attempt a wrong turn, and fate placed the Archduke in Princip's path. 2 shots ended 2 lives and set the world on fire. The assassination was not the cause, but the spark that set alliances in motion. Europe's web of promises and rivalries snapped into action. No one imagined 2 bullets would lead to millions of deaths. The dominoes began to fall. The world would never be the same. The assassination in Sarajevo sparked a fuse, News raced across Europe, carried by telegraph and newspapers. The world held its breath. The news ignited outrage and fear. Populations reacted with shock and growing dread as the drums of war beat louder. Austria-Hungary, wanting retribution, blamed Serbia. An ultimatum was issued, designed to be rejected. Austria-Hungary declared war, setting off a chain reaction. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia, but Germany saw this as an act of war. Germany, bound by treaty, declared war on Russia, escalating the conflict. France, allied with Russia, prepared for war, activating the web of alliances. Germany enacted the Schlieffen Plan, invading neutral Belgium. Outraged, Britain entered the war to defend Belgium. A regional crisis spiraled into a global conflict. Across Europe, crowds cheered and young men enlisted. Soldiers believed the conflict would be short, expecting to be home by Christmas. But the reality would be a brutal and protracted struggle. The world was irrevocably divided, lines drawn that would determine the fate of nations. The conflict rapidly spread, engulfing nations in a devastating global war. The Battle of the Somme became a chilling symbol of the war's unprecedented horror. The once fertile fields were scarred beyond recognition. July 1st, 1916, marked the beginning of an offensive that would forever alter the course of the Great War, a day of unimaginable loss and suffering. British and French troops launched a massive attack against the heavily fortified German lines. This assault came after a week-long, relentless artillery bombardment. The German defenses, far from being obliterated, had largely held with deep bunkers and well-placed machine gun nests remained intact. As the advancing soldiers emerged from their trenches and bravely walked into no man's land, they were met with a devastating storm of machine gun fire. The result was catastrophic. Nearly 60,000 British casualties fell on that single, horrific first day alone. In the end, the Battle of the Somme resulted in over 1 million casualties, a staggering loss of life, all for the gain of a few miles of ground. The impact on communities back home was devastating, as entire villages and towns lost their sons. The Battle of the Somme left an indelible scar on an entire generation, both physically and emotionally. It served as a brutal lesson in the true and terrible cost of war. The once vibrant green fields of the Somme became a vast graveyard. For most soldiers, war meant endless days in the trenches. The Western Front stretched for hundreds of miles, a world of mud, rats, and constant danger. Rain turned trenches into rivers of filth. Lice and disease were everywhere. The enemy was often just yards away across no man's land. The noise of shells and machine guns was relentless. Many suffered from shell shock, their minds broken by terror. Yet in the mud, soldiers forged deep bonds, sharing food, letters, and hope. Small comforts became treasures, a dry sock, a letter from home. Camaraderie was their lifeline. In the darkest places, friendship helped them endure. World War I unleashed terrifying new weapons. Machine guns made charging across open ground nearly suicidal. Tanks, first used at the Somme, rumbled through mud and barbed wire, hinting at the future of war. The sky became a battlefield. Planes spied, fought, and bombed, bringing war to civilians. Poison gas choked and blinded, forcing soldiers to carry gas masks at all times. Old tactics met industrial killing. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse of men versus machines. Technology changed war forever. The cost was measured in millions of lives. By 1918, Europe was exhausted, armies shattered, people starving. The arrival of American troops tipped the balance for the Allies. Germany's army collapsed. Revolution forced the Kaiser to abdicate. On November 11th, 1918, the guns fell silent. The war was over, but the cost was staggering: millions dead, millions more wounded. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh terms on Germany, blame reparations, and loss of territory. Many Germans felt humiliated and betrayed. The treaty's harshness bred anger and resentment. Instead of lasting peace, it planted the seeds for future conflict. The war to end all wars ended, but its peace was fragile. The world was left to mourn and rebuild. The old order was gone. A troubled new era began. The Great War shattered the old world and shaped the one we know. Empires fell, new countries rose, but new borders brought new tensions. Women entered the workforce, fueling the fight for rights and changing society. Class barriers broke down in the shared misery of war. The psychological scars ran deep. Disillusionment replaced old optimism. Art and literature reflected the horror and questioned old beliefs. The war taught the dangers of unchecked nationalism and militarism. Remembering is not just about the past, it's about understanding our present. The sacrifice of a lost generation must never be forgotten. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more journeys into history.